Oh, this is excellent. It looks like we are officially live. Hi, everyone. How are you doing? Oh, this is very exciting. Hi. All right, so it is just about 11, it's 11 o'clock. Wow, this is great. So we are getting started right on time over here. So I just want to welcome everyone, welcome them into the live stream. We'll probably just get started in about a minute or so to give folks the chance to settle in and get excited for this really special Labside chat we have lined up for you. But as we're waiting for folks to tune in, go ahead and introduce yourself in the live chat or in the live comments. We'd love to see where our viewers are tuning in from and where they're watching. A couple weeks ago, we had a couple of viewers of a Labside chat coming in like from Texas and Maryland. It was super exciting. So go ahead and say hi. And then maybe even Sarah McKay and myself can give you a shout out. All right, excellent. So it's just 1 minute after 11. So let's go ahead and get started. We don't really have any time to waste. So officially, hi, it is so great to see you all tuning in, and welcome to a very special Sea Otter Awareness Week Labside chat with the Seymour Marine Discovery Center. My name is Jen Cormier, and I am the Visitor Programs Manager with the Seymour Center, and we're so happy that you are all here today. So today we have a Labside chat lined up for you all, where we are going to learn directly from a UC Santa Cruz scientist, where we are able to really dive in and discuss how scientific research plays a role in the understanding and conservation of the world's oceans. I am so excited for today's chat because we have the pleasure of talking to and asking questions to Dr. Sarah McKay Strobel. And Dr. Sarah McKay Strobel is with the Ecology and Evolutionary Biology Department at UC Santa Cruz, and we'll be talking all about sea otters and how they survive out in the ocean and some of the really unique biology that sea otters have. So Sarah McKay, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and celebrating Sea Otter Awareness Week with everyone.
Well, we are so excited that you're here, and I'm thrilled to pick your brain and learn more about your research. But I have a couple of thank yous for the folks watching at home right up top. First off, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone who submitted questions in advance for this Labside chat today. Thank you all so much. There's so many wonderful questions. I really hope we have time to dive through them all. But if any of you have any questions about sea otters or anything like that during today's chat, please go ahead and also add it to our live comment feed, and we'll be able to get to those as well. So Sarah McKay, I hope you're ready because we have lots of questions. So I say let's just get to it because we don't really have any time to spare. So I said that you study sea otters. That is absolutely fantastic. It sounds like an incredible dream job. But what about sea otters are you specifically trying to understand?
Yeah, so I'll start by saying that I used to not be that interested in sea otters. And so I am a total sea otter convert, and now I think that they're the absolute best and the most interesting marine mammal. So what I think is really cool about sea otters is how much they have to eat. So I feel like this is one of those common facts that gets thrown around about sea otters, that they have to eat 25% of their body weight every day. That can even be a little bit more for like females who might be pregnant or are taking care of a pup. And if you think about that in the context of like what you eat as a human, like you wouldn't be able to eat that much per day as a human. It's just like not possible. So given that sea otters have this really strong drive and this need to eat a lot of food, that also means that they have to be able to find food, and they have to find food really efficiently. So they can't waste a lot of time and energy searching and searching and searching and not being successful. So how are they doing that? That's kind of where my research comes in, with looking at, well, what are the sensory systems that they're using? What are their cognitive abilities? How are they able to find food, capture it, extract the meat, and then start the process all over again and do all that in a really, really quick way so that they're not wasting that much time. And they're also they're not just like going to a grocery store and like picking things off shelves. They are having to hunt for food in the middle of the day. At night, they're having to overturn boulders, dig in the sand. So they really have to like work hard. So I'm just really interested in what enables them to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And so when sea otters are finding food, they have to dive down, right, to in the kelp forest and look for all that food. And so you were saying they have to like turn over boulders and look for things. And so so my first question is, how deep are sea otters diving to find food?
Yeah, so I mean, relative to other marine mammals, they're considered shallow divers. So anywhere from like 10 to 30 feet. And then there are some sea otters that can dive up to like 100 feet. So they tend to be a little bit more shallow. But even then, the way that light works in water, it attenuates really quickly the deeper that you go. So even if you're diving in shallow water, there's not that much light available relative to the surface. So there's still going to be constraints even though they are diving pretty shallowly.
Right. And I'm so glad you said that, because that actually is my second question, is that even though they're technically shallow divers, like I can only imagine that the the light is very, very low and it's so dimly lit down there, and like they're looking for food. And so can they see it? Like, are they able, do sea otters have good eyesight? Like, or how are they able to find food in those dimly lit conditions?
Yeah, super interesting question. Really hard question to answer. I have tried recently. So when you first look at sea otters, their eyes, they don't seem that impressive. I mean, their eyes seem a little bit small, kind of beady. Like it's not usually what people don't usually think about vision when they think of sea otters. But if you watch them behave, they do visually attune to disturbances. They look around. They are using their vision to behave in social interactions, and maybe avoiding danger or disturbance at the surface. So that's one cue, like, okay, I think they're using vision. And then if you watch them, if you've ever been to an aquarium and watch them when they dive, they visually orient to things underwater too. So that's another cue from watching their behavior. So from studies that have been done, they don't see necessarily super clearly. So they actually, I wear glasses and contacts, and I'm sure many other people watching this do. And my prescription probably puts me about like how clear a sea otter can see when I'm not wearing my glasses or my contacts. So, which is pretty blurry. But what sea otters can do is they have a lot of what we call rods, which are a type of photoreceptor that is really light sensitive on their retina. And actually what you see behind me is the back of a sea otter's eyeball. It's a sea otter's retina. So all that blue, we assume are rods, so really highly light sensitive cells. And those little green dots are what we call cones, which they are light sensitive too, but they tend to be more useful in like bright light environments. So the fact that sea otters have a lot of these blue blue rods, really highly light sensitive photoreceptors, that's a clue that, okay, they can actually see well in low light too. So for sea otters, it's kind of this trade-off where they can probably see okay in bright light. It's probably going to be a little bit blurry, but probably still useful enough to do some things. And they can probably also pick out some things at low light, but it's not going to be like a really clear, sharp image that it might be for some other marine mammals.
Yeah, definitely. And so, do sea otters rely on a sense besides eyesight to find food? Like, are they like, do they have a great sense of smell or great sense of hearing or touch, or do they rely on other things just besides eyesight?
Yeah, so another great question, because when you think about sensory systems, there's always trade-offs, and like, okay, if you're maybe not such a specialist in this sense, then what's the other thing that you're using to do a good job with whatever it is you're trying to do? So a couple of cues from behavior. If you've ever watched sea otters, you'll notice they're always like doing things with their hands and always active with them. And we did some research looking at the sensitivity of sea otter paws and their whiskers. So those are the two pieces of their body that might have really heightened touch sensitivity. And from those studies, we were able to tell that sea otters' paws are about as sensitive as a human hand. And their whiskers are also really sensitive too, but their paws especially. And what's really interesting about that study is that the sea otters had just as good tactile touch sensitivity as humans, but they were able to use it very, very quickly. So they were able to use information that they got from touch to make a decision way faster than humans. And so I really like speaking to that because I think it really makes sense when you consider how quickly sea otters have to make decisions when they're diving to try to get all that food that they need every day to survive.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? Because they're also holding their breath and they're down there looking for food in these low light conditions. So, wow, that is absolutely incredible. And so my next question that I have is, I'm so interested in how you were able to get data for this, because I can only imagine, like, were you out in the field observing sea otters from shore? Were you in a controlled setting? Like, what did you do to learn this information?
Yeah, so what really helped to start was that sea otters have been studied so well for decades in the wild. So a lot of studies done by Monterey Bay Aquarium and UC Santa Cruz and the US Geological Survey, they've observed sea otter behavior just using like telescopes and standing on the cliffs by the sea and watching them, and also using animal tracking devices to track their behavior. So all of those studies helped us figure out, okay, well, what questions do we want to ask in a more controlled setting? Like, what do we think is going to be important to look at in sea otters? So all of those studies helped us hone in on, okay, let's look at vision, let's look at touch in a more controlled environment. And so the way that we did that was working with Colleen Reichmuth's lab, who was my PhD advisor at UC Santa Cruz. And we worked with a trained captive sea otter who's trained to participate voluntarily in research sensory tasks. So it's kind of similar to if you go to a doctor's office and if you do a hearing test or you go get a vision test, where someone is asking you a question of like, do you see this? Do you hear that? And you answer yes or you answer no. It's very similar to that, where you're figuring out how to ask this animal a question that they can either respond yes or no to you. And the way that they respond is maybe by touching their paw to like a square, or they push a button somewhere. So you just have to figure out, how do I ask this question in a way that the animal will understand it and that they can respond to me and I can understand, are they saying yes or are they saying no?
Yeah, wow, that is absolutely incredible. And has that ever been done before? Like, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but I can only imagine, like, I've never heard of something happening like this. So is this the first time that sea otter senses have been explored in this way?
Kind of like, so there's some older studies that try to look at sea otter vision, but there's really only really one study I can think of. And then when I started graduate school, the lab I was a graduate student in, Colleen Reichmuth's lab, they had just finished looking at hearing in sea otters, because there's lots of other marine mammals that seem to have really heightened hearing, but it was kind of unclear if sea otters did. So that kind of was the first recent push towards understanding sea otter sensory biology. So I kind of got to jump onto that when I started. And so we are the first ones to really explore sea otter touch abilities, and then to kind of push the field more on sea otter vision.
That is so awesome and so inspiring. And so cool that you are able to find all of this out and then share it with us. And so my question is that you were able to find out that sea otters are, almost have like the same, what did you say, tactile sensory information as a human hand, but their decision making is really, really quick. So were you able to time that decision making in a sea otter?
Yeah. So the way that we looked at that with our sea otter is we essentially had two different textures that she had to feel with either her whiskers while she was wearing a blindfold, or with her paws. And when we always gave the choice of one of those, she got food for choosing it. So over time, when you start to change the similarity of those two textures to each other, you can start to figure out, well, where's the point at which the animal can no longer tell the difference? So the way that she would tell us, this is the one, this is my choice, is she would push the textured plate down. So she'd kind of like push it, and that would activate this electrical switch. So what we could do is we could look at the video footage and compare it to the timing that we recorded with the electrical switch to figure out, okay, she's exploring, now she's made her choice. So we could really quantify how long it took her to make a choice once she had access to explore the textures.
Wow, that's so cool. So we know that sea otters, they're diving, they're looking for food, but we never talked about what sea otters need to eat, right? So they eat a lot and they need to go look for it in a kelp forest or whatnot. But like, what are they looking for? Are they looking for something specific, something general, anything with meat on it? What are they mostly eating?
Yeah, it's interesting. So sea otters as a species are kind of generalists. They eat a lot of different types of food. So they eat a lot of invertebrates, and that can be really hard-shelled creatures like crabs and clams, but they also eat things like innkeeper worms that are more soft-bodied. But most everything that they eat is either buried like under the sand so that they would have to dig for it, or it's maybe hiding in rock crevices, or for example, maybe snails, they are going to be distributed along a kelp frond. There are some reports of sea otters eating fish, like in the Alaska region and the northern regions. I would love to watch a sea otter try to catch a fish. That would be so interesting. But they eat a lot of different types of things. And then as individuals, at least in the California population, they tend to, from what we know so far, specialize. So like you might be a specialist on crabs and I might be a specialist on clams. And so you tend to eat more of that and I tend to eat more of what I eat. But as a species, they eat a lot of different things.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's really great. And so you said earlier that you kind of stumbled into sea otters, that it wasn't that they didn't really come to you at first. And so I wanted to dive in a little bit more about that. Like, how did you know that one, you wanted to be a biologist or a scientist, and how did sea otters come into your life?
Yeah, so I have one of those stories that I feel like a lot of marine biologists do, where I kind of knew I was interested in it from a very young age. And I remember specifically reading a book by Madeline L'Engle called A Ring of Endless Light when I was 7. And it was all about this, it's kind of a coming of age story of this girl near the ocean and science and understanding behavior of the ocean creatures. And I just was like, okay, I'm in, I knew it. In terms of sea otters, like I knew I was interested in amphibious animals. So animals that have to live their life across this transition of I'm alive in air and I'm also alive in water. And how do I do that? Because there's a lot, your senses are designed, or they fit the environment that you're in. So when you or I try to go swimming and we duck our heads underwater, our vision's a bit blurry. And that's because our vision as humans it hasn't evolved to work really well underwater. So that was always really interesting to me, of how do amphibious animals function well in both environments. And so that kind of drew me to marine mammals, and then ultimately fell in love with sea otters just because of the questions you can ask with them, because they eat so much and because they have this high drive to be efficient. it's a really great system to look at to see, okay, given that efficiency, what have they developed in their perception? It's just fun to kind of look at species that are living at the edge to understand their behavior.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible that you had this light bulb moment at age 7 that you wanted to go down this road. That's so great. So, do you have any advice for maybe some aspiring marine biologists that also want to go down this path? Like, what is some words of wisdom you have for these folks?
Yeah, I would say to try to surround yourself with people that will support you, because community is everything in science and in finding a good community. I also think observation is a big piece of it. You know, you don't, it's great if you feel like you're getting good grades in math and science, but even if you aren't getting that, that doesn't mean that you can't be a great biologist later. And I think if you go outside and you're observing the species around you, you're respecting them, you're really thinking about, like, how does this animal work? And how does this community of birds and fish and grass and all these different living things work together? You know, if that excites you and you're willing to just watch them and get excited by that, then I think hold on to that and keep doing that, because that's the type of biologist that we need.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, community and enthusiasm, those are two wonderful, wonderful answers. So, Sarah McKay, I only have a couple of questions left for you. And one of the questions I have is it's a bit funny one. So, we know that you study sea otters, you look at sea otter census, but if you were at a non-scientific dinner party or a cocktail party, do you have like a go-to sea otter fun fact that you that you use to impress people?
I think I like to say, sea otters, they are objectively adorable. You know, they're really cute, fuzzy little creatures. But I like to remind people that they are weasels. And if you've ever been around another type of weasel, you'll know that they are really headstrong. They're really stubborn, and they can be kind of bratty sometimes. So just like, I think that's kind of why I like them. They are really cute, but they're really spunky, and they definitely got a big attitude for their size. So I think I like to remind people about that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I 100% agree with that they are spunky. That's a great word to use. Awesome. So my other question that I have for you is, what do you love most about this job? Like, what do you love most about being a sea otter researcher? Is it, discovering more about how they use their senses to survive out in the ocean? Is it interacting with your community? Like, anything goes. What do you love most?
Yeah, I think what I love most is that it makes me consider perspectives that are different than my own. So as a human, as humans, we all experience the world in a very human-centric way, the way that we see, the way that we smell and hear and touch. But there are so many other animals in the world, sea otters included, that they're living in the same world as us, but they perceive it completely differently, and they have senses and abilities that we can't even possibly comprehend what that's like. And that, I think, that just like drives everything that I do. I just think it's so fascinating to realize that, okay, the way that humans do things is one way to do it. It's not the best way to do it. It's just one way to do it. And so I really like finding out what other animals are capable of.
Yeah, that is so incredible. So if you didn't want to be a scientist now, I think that answer probably inspired, I know, hundreds of scientists out there. That's really, really incredible. So let's see, we got one more question here, and I promise this is our last question because we are quickly running out of time. But my question for you is a really important one, and it addresses conservation, right? Because we know that sea otters are a threatened species, and a lot of people are trying to do everything that they can to help protect this species and help the population. So do you have any advice or tips or recommendations for non-scientists, individuals like me who can do something to help conserve the species?
Yeah. I think staying informed is a big piece. So reading, and scientists have to do our part to outreach and make sure that we are getting you materials to read and look at. I think voting to ensure that science continues to be funded, that's a big one. And I think just being in this mindset when you go out and look at wildlife, that animals have their own goals, their own motivations when they are living in this world that have nothing to do with us. So just kind of recognizing that and realizing that, you're there to kind of understand the animal's perspective on things, not necessarily to be entertained by the animal.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I just can't say thank you enough for sharing your expertise on sea otter senses and for showing us the back of a sea otter's eyeball. That is incredible. I've never seen a photo like that before. So that is so exciting to see. But Sarah, since I can't ask you the hundreds of more questions that I want to, do you have a place online, a website, social media, or someplace where folks can go to learn more about you and your research?
Yeah, so I am new to the Twitterverse. So I do have a Twitter account. It's S McKay Strobel. So please feel free to follow me and just be patient with me as I learn how to tweet and get used to all of that. But that's where updates will be coming.
Okay, that's fantastic. So I will make sure to add that handle down to our video description below so folks can learn more about your research and what you do. I know we have a few other questions and whatnot, so maybe after today's chat, we'll be able to answer those also in the video description below, because the questions that we got are really, really good and I think worth addressing. So, but I just want to say a big, big thank you to Sarah McKay for joining us today. I also want to send out a big thank you to everyone tuning in today. We are officially out of time, but again, please go to Sarah McKay's Twitter handle to learn more about sea otters and their research. So I also want to say a huge thank you or a big shout out to all of our Seymour Center supporters for tuning in. It's really folks like you that make these online programs possible. So if you are in the position, I ask that you please either make a donation or become a member with the Seymour Center. You can find a lot more information on the Seymour Center's website. That website is seymourcenter.ucsc.edu, or you can go ahead and click on the links in the video description below. But keep celebrating Sea Otter Awareness Week with us all week long. We have another great event lined up for tomorrow. So if you're not already, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and get alerted when that video gets started tomorrow at 11 a.m. So why don't we, so this is the end of our program. Again, thank you all for tuning in. We can't say thank you enough, and stay safe, stay healthy. We're thinking about you all, and go see otters. Bye everyone.